So thank you, Anvita. So we'll make it as interactive as possible, and I'll ask you a couple of questions. Maybe then we can ask if anyone wants to add any. So let's start at the beginning. India has no shortage of venture capital firms. What made you say the world needs perpetual capital and it needs to be built around impact?
Uh, you're right. There's no lack of venture capital firms today in the country, but I think we wanted to be a mission-driven fund, and I think there is still a lack of that. And I think, as the name implies, one key part of what we were building out also was like this idea of patient capital, which I think is also lacking in today's space, especially and then usually patient capital is a capital that I think is necessary. For building out a market as well, right? Like larger, like markets that take time to develop, whether it's like climate tech, agri. Some of these markets, they take decades and they don't really fit into the thesis or the kind of the promises or the premise of conventional venture capital, right? So that's why we thought that we would, and as a venture fund, as a family office, we're also very focused on very early stage investments, right? Being the first check into certain companies that would not be a conventional bet for a venture fund, but eventually we do get a lot of follow on from venture funds. Right? For example, there's this company which I think was one of our earliest bets called Willcart, which basically catered to like tier 5, tier 6 consumer, right? And like consumer day to day goods. And of course, no venture fund will take it as a bet because they do, who believes that tier 5, tier 6 India has like the spending ability, right? But they also leverage like local ecosystems that existed already and kind of built it out. And today they're in 100 crore per month revenue, and lots of large venture funds have followed on, right? So yeah, so I think that that's kind of where we feel like we can be different and we have something to offer.
So where will you give more weightage? What will you give more weightage to? Being a sustainable company or being more profitable?
So we're not like we value impact and it is a non and we value sustainability in the core DNA of the company, but we're not exclusively an impact fund, and we are at the end of the day still like a fund. So we would also value like overall, and I think genuinely long term growth I think will come more from building out sustainable businesses than just CSR or like NGO like activities.
Absolutely,
Right?
I think
So
the
yeah.
business has to make money to be sustainable as well. So there is a significant transformation or uh, compared to the list that we put out 3 years back to now in terms of spend towards sustainability. Do you think it's becoming more of a buzzword to raise more capital? What are your generic thoughts on that? Is it really some transformation that's happening, or is it we're still at a very early stage from a country standpoint?
Right. So I think that I mean I think we were also discussing earlier. There's a lot of change that's happening, whether external or internal, and I think it has both aspects, right? Like externally, there are a lot of requirements from other countries, like whether it's the Nordic countries or whether it's Europe. They have certain requirements, and for companies, Indian companies that are exporting or working or getting money from these companies, they have to comply with that. But also internally, there are consumer demands as well, right? For certain level of whether it's about water. Right now, I think we're touching upon like the very nascent stage. We're asking for basic things like water, waste disposal, and like equitable like hiring practices, right? So I think all of this is. There are both aspects, and but the fact at all that people are taking it seriously and like large companies are making it such a big mandate. And I think you were also saying with the 3 years ago, the framework that people had in place when you were putting together the report, and today the framework has, at least it's a conversation, right? People are kind of including this in their practice, and if large companies do it, they also create the ecosystem and the market for the smaller companies to follow, right? Like for us as well, whatever is kind of triggering it, the fact that it is being triggered is a fact, and the fact that as long as these same the same conditions continue, we will be in a much better place 5 years from today, right? So how much of it is like a buzzword, how much of it is greenwashing, regardless, like there is something happening, and that is like not debatable, right? Um,
And even if you look at our report, the Perpetual Capital Run Impact 2026, almost 30% of the list sources one-fifth of their materials from MSMEs, and supply chain is coming more from small and medium enterprises, right? Is supply chain an integral part towards building a sustainable sort of
I
nation?
think for a country like India, it is like the biggest threat to like, I mean, the biggest negative that could come from growth over the next 10, 20, 30 years is like inequality, right? Like inequitable distribution of the same wealth. So I think one way to really counteract that is to make sure that the supply chain incorporates, whether it's rural industries, whether it's like artisan networks, farmer networks, smaller companies, right? That, and I think that's the advantage also. The Indian supply chain is still in a very nascent stage, is still fragmented, right? Which means it allows for participation from all of these communities and all of these networks. So I think to kind of keep that as we grow is very important in making sure that we have actual sustainable growth of the country, right? Yeah.
No. And you back what stage of companies do you back?
So very, very early stage, like the
Yeah.
first check, usually, like in
High,
almost all of our companies.
so high risk also, right? So
Yes.
how do you? I think you did touch upon this earlier, but how do you ensure that if the sustainable side of objectives are met? You're already in a very high risk zone. On top of that, you have these other goals as well, right? I mean, how do
I think
you?
some of these things are like basic practices that can be incorporated at the very early stage of the company, and they will scale as the company scales, right? And I also think that it's not necessarily always a trade-off. Like it's not like you're doing it at the, it maybe means spending a bit more time to find the right partners in your journey, but I think long term they will, you will see that it will give more value both to your internal teams and to your external customers, right?
From a future growth standpoint, not only from an internal sort of operations perspective, but also to attract global capital for Indian companies to be following all these sustainability goals?
I think it's very important. I think the fact that these larger companies are already taking it on, I think shows that whether it's an external fund that's investing in India or whether it's somebody sourcing from here, right? They do have these mandates, and then internally as well, if these larger companies start having these mandates, the smaller companies that are eventually going to be part of the supply chain for the larger company will have to follow the same, right? There will be that trickle down impact. So I think that, I mean, and I think it's very important in kind of creating the ecosystem to reach the final SDG goal that's like within some time frame, right?
No, I think we have this AI summit that's happening in Delhi. Yesterday, I was in Hyderabad meeting one of the renewable energy companies, the kind of capacity growth expansions that they have in mind, and mostly to support the data center opportunities that could come out because of this massive AI sort of investment. It has to be done through sustainable energy generation practice. It cannot be generated by coal and fossil fuels. Yeah. So, have you thought about it? How AI and green energy and how all that is going to evolve in the future? Have you?
So I think even for this, right, like whether in supporting the, like we were also saying in one of our companies that we've invested in, they're also doing, they're looking at like the cooling for the data centers, but by using like the air and the water in the air essentially, right? So I think as different challenges kind of come about based on computing capacity or later also social impact of AI in terms of like whether figuring out how to do like what the new economy of job creation is, right? I think all of this will require people to think about it and like money to be put behind it. So it's important to kind of have that framework going in, right?
Correct. I think almost. I think some of these companies will definitely get into data centers for sure. So. Great. Before we move to the next bunch of questions, I would like to request if you have any questions, you can ask us and we'll try to answer. May I have the mics, please? Yeah. So I did explain the methodology in my speech. I think so. What we're trying to do is the look at the 17 SDGs, right, and UN Sustainability Development Goals, right, and we have primarily focused on giving points to. There are two, three, four parameters, but the main parameters are there written, documented commitment towards each of these pillars, right? If there is a written documented commitment, is there a team that is executing the plan for achieving these goals? and three, is it being measured on a consistent basis? So those are the high level two, three, four yardsticks we look at. After we do that, then there are certain industries which are by definition comes into the sustainable sort of categories, right? So then we give them bonus points. Then there are certain industries by definition of their existence, they could be polluting and so on. They'll get some penal points as well. So we applied that. Then Niti Aayog has defined around seven SDGs that are important from an Indian context. So those seven SDGs, we've looked at all these companies, and we've studied if for these seven SDGs, if anybody has crossed more than 3 points, we give them an additional point as well. And altogether, we look at about 163, then we index it back to 100, and that's how we arrived at the scoring. And we've relied completely on publicly available data, which is annual reports, BRSR, sustainability reports, CSR. That's the complete reliance is on publicly available data. And the universe that we've gone after is top 150 listed companies at this point. So that's the methodology.
How many Hyderabad-based companies are placed in this list?
Around two over there. I think I'll give you the exact numbers. Yeah, but
One
two.
is Reddy Labs, another one.
The second one, Hyderabad. Can we give the list of Hyderabad?
Yeah,
We'll give it to you right after this. Yeah.
When was the survey conducted?
Over last 1 year, last 6-7 months, based on the FY 24-25 data. Yeah. Yeah,
Any more questions? Right.
cool. So I'll ask one last question before we maybe move forward. You said you provide strategic guidance, operational playbooks, and network access, and every VC says that. What does Perpetual Capital actually do differently once the check is signed?
So honestly, I think we want to be so both of us, like both my brother and I, are like operators and founders first, right? So I think that we also kind of understand where, at least we feel like we have the empathy to kind of understand where founders would require the help and where not. I feel like sometimes. Some venture funds also, it's not like all advice is good advice, right? Like I also think sometimes founders need, they also know inherently their space and what they're going after very well, and like we don't need to necessarily look at it like board meeting to board meeting. We need to kind of add value, so we need to be there, but it's more like whenever they require any help from us, right, we want to make sure that we're available and we're the first call, right? So whenever they're navigating any decision, whether it is like for example, one of our companies, if they had to kind of reconfigure the, like Adukule is a snack company, and when they had to work on like their the product line to kind of improve the nutritional value, like we were working with them. It's the same company. Like if they had to get on QCOM, they reached out to us, and then we were able to kind of make sure that they get listed, right? So I think it's more like it's we're not in a traditional venture format where every board meeting they have to report to us. They need to kind of this one. We want to kind of keep it more dependent on what the founder needs from us, right? Like make it a very tailored relationship. Like we have check-ins, but it's more based on their needs and their requirements, and not necessarily like the conventional framework of what like every venture fund would follow.
I'll ask one more question. I think very interestingly, Pranav also said that you have a very interesting mix of being an operator, which means you know all the troubles of running a business. I myself am an operator, and now you're going to. I think this new fund that is started, right? I think you've got to be on the other side of the table. Uh, so and you have certain and you want to do it right. I mean, that's why the very name in itself, it's not just profit as a motive, but also to generate certain returns as well, only long-term returns as well, right? So how do you match all that and putting that into context in terms of the perpetual capital Hurun India Back 50? How do you see the sustainability side of India will evolve in the next 10 years? No one can verify it, but 10 years from now, we'll probably look at this video and see whether what you've said is right.
Yeah, so I think hopefully going forward, like 5-10 years from now, we're going to see that ecosystem matured, right? Like it's not it kind of becomes like a competitive advantage and a non-negotiable to kind of have some of these things figured out very early on. So while we've kind of formalized Perpetual Capital as a fund now, but the family office, we've been investing for the past like 10 years, right, 7 to 8 years. And then we're also looking at it going forward to kind of continue to invest, but also to operate our own businesses because we want, I think being a founder like gives you that empathy also when you're investing in other founders to really value, to put yourself in their shoes to kind of understand whenever you're making decisions, right, for the company, you're also making sure that you have the right intention for the founder. You're making sure you're not kind of at the cost of them doing anything, right? And the other thing is you also like fundamentally understand that building out a business is very long term, right? We're not looking at kind of short term returns. You want to build out truly sustainable companies that generate value over a long period of time, right? And I think building a business also shows you to be patient when everyone else is building their business, right? So I think that yeah, so I think this it kind of goes well for us, and that's how we have kind of looked at it going forward as well. That we keep the founder and the operator mindset while we're investing, because I think that would be to the advantage of the founders as well, right?
What do you think about 10 years from now? How this, let's say, will this list be a 100-member list? What do you, from where you
Like in
stand
terms, yeah,
now?
for sure. I definitely hope that we're going to see going forward, like I said, that this becomes a non-negotiable. The ecosystem has matured a lot more, right? It becomes like a competitive advantage and a need to have for most companies, right? Whether it's the large top 150 companies or like the young startups that are launching today, right? So I think, yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I have a big
Thank
round
you.
of applause for Anvita, please?
Thanks.
Thank you. I welcome you all to the launch of the 2026 edition of Perpetual Capital Hurun India Impact 50. This list is our analysis of understanding some of India's most sustainable companies based on our methodology of looking at the various UN SDGs and allocating scores to them based on the UN SDGs. The objective of the list is to try and understand where we as a country stand when it comes to reporting and measuring sustainability goals. This is, I would say, this is just the very first year of. With this methodology, we looked at top 150 listed companies. In the future years, we hope to expand the universe, look at private companies, and try and expand, say, speak more about the sustainability stories of India. Now, Hurun India is very proud to have partnered with Perpetual Capital to launch this edition of the list. Perpetual Capital is a fund that's been run by Pranav and Anvita, and it's mainly about trying and supporting startups in terms of achieving their goals, which is not limited to a certain time frame, but in terms of perpetuity. And it's very much in line with what the ethos of the Perpetual Capital Hurun India Impact 50 Lists initiative is. It's about trying to understand how the companies are building sustainably in perpetuity and adding to the nation in terms of the overall economic goals as well. Would you want to add
What is
something?
the difference between your company and private equity?
Private?
What is the difference between perpetual capital and private
That you
equity?
can.
Do invest in private equity, but we're not private equity in the sense that we look at growth stage companies. We look at founders very, very early on. So the minute they want to raise external capital to start building out their business in the seed or pre-seed stage, that's where we come in. So they might just have an idea for, somewhere they've noticed a white space or a gap in terms of solving for environmental uh, let's say runoff, right? They come up with an ideation, they come to us, and if we see validity in their story and they have insights that otherwise people would not recognize, that's where we come in and invest.
What is the main vision and mission of this company?
I think the main mission and vision of Perpetual Capital is to create companies or to help companies make a true impact within not just a 7 to 10 year time horizon, but a 20-year time horizon. And hopefully, 10, 20 years down the line, we see one of our companies up here in the list. But yeah, that's the thing. Thank you.
Thank you.